The stars appeared impossibly distant, yet tantalizingly within reach. Standing on the bridge of the Endeavour, Captain Sarah Okonkwo watched brilliant colors swirl as the wormhole folded in on itself behind them. They'd actually pulled it off. For the first time, humans had escaped the solar system's boundaries and ventured into uncharted territory. Her diverse team of 43 individuals from 12 nations had just etched their names into history. They were aboard the first vessel capable of exceeding light speed, now positioned in what Earth astronomers referred to as the Sagittarius frontier. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her second officer, repeatedly checked his instruments with trembling hands. Everyone sensed the magnitude of their achievement. 2 centuries of imagination, 5 decades of construction, and now reality. The massive wormhole generator, consuming enough electricity to power half of Europe and barely fitting in their cargo hold, had actually worked. Marcus's tense voice cut through the silence. "Captain, I'm detecting something unusual. Multiple contacts approaching. They're enormous." Sarah approached his station to examine the radar. 7 massive objects appeared on screen, each dwarfing the Endeavour by at least double. They'd arranged themselves in a perfect semicircle, effectively blocking any path forward. Her pulse quickened, though she maintained composure. "Open communication channels on every frequency. Make clear our peaceful intentions." Almost instantly, they received a reply. A screen illuminated, revealing a creature beyond Sarah's wildest imagination. Its crystalline body resembled living glass, shifting through prismatic colors with geometric patterns moving beneath the surface. Where features should be, only a smooth plane somehow expressed cold disdain. "Unidentified vessel," it announced. The words arrived perfectly translated to English through unknown means. "You've entered space governed by the Galactic Council. Under Protocol 773, all newcomer species must undergo immediate technological assessment. Disable your propulsion and prepare for boarding." Sarah and Marcus exchanged concerned glances. They'd rehearsed countless first contact scenarios, but being commanded around within minutes wasn't in any playbook. Still, they'd traveled here seeking friendship, not conflict. She drew a breath and signaled her communications officer. "I'm Captain Sarah Okonkwo of the human vessel Endeavour, representing the United Earth Coalition. We acknowledge your jurisdiction and will follow your protocols. We're eager to meet you." The crystalline being's surface rippled in what might have been amusement. "How diplomatic indeed. We are the Vilnathi. I'm Council Representative Thilnara, assigned to evaluate first contact. Hold your position while we approach." The screen darkened. Sarah addressed her team. "Everyone prepare for visitors. Scientific personnel to the docking bay. Security, keep weapons holstered but accessible. We're making history right now. Let's ensure it's positive history." 30 minutes passed before Sarah stood in the main corridor as the airlock hissed. Thilnara entered first, accompanied by 2 other aliens. One appeared like a floating jellyfish composed of purple energy, its tendrils drifting through invisible current. The other was roughly humanoid but covered in silver fur with 3 eyes arranged triangularly. Behind them came what looked like robots hauling scanning devices. "Welcome aboard the Endeavour," Sarah offered, extending her hand in traditional greeting. Thilnara regarded her hand as if she'd presented something repulsive. "We don't participate in fluid transfer customs. I'm accompanied by Evaluator Soren of the Vin Collective and Technician Grex of the Hultoran Republic. We'll inspect your vessel and document your technological advancement. Standard procedure for species seeking council acknowledgement." Sarah withdrew her hand, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. She masked her embarrassment by gesturing down the corridor. "Certainly. Our chief engineer, Dr. James Rodriguez, will demonstrate our system. We've compiled complete documentation of our capabilities." The inspection consumed 6 hours. Sarah shadowed the evaluation team throughout the ship, observing as they scanned everything from fusion reactors to life support. Rodriguez explained each system enthusiastically, describing how humanity had conquered countless obstacles to reach the stars. The team listened silently, recording notes on floating devices. Reaching the weapons bay, Sarah noticed Thilnara's surface shift darker. The Vilnathi moved closer to the mounted railgun, a massive electromagnetic accelerator capable of launching tungsten slugs at 30 kilometers per second. It was humanity's triumph, a weapon that could penetrate asteroids and defend against debris or threats. "What exactly is this device?" Thilnara inquired. "That's our primary defensive armament," Dr. Rodriguez explained, patting the railgun's housing. "An electromagnetic mass accelerator. We call it a railgun. It employs magnetic fields to propel projectiles at extreme velocity. This particular model can fire a 2-kilogram slug at approximately 30,000 meters per second. The kinetic energy alone is devastating." The jellyfish alien Soren pulsed bright purple, a reaction Sarah had learned indicated surprise. You employ kinetic projectile, physical matter hurled through space. Rodriguez looked puzzled. Correct, it's highly effective. We've conducted extensive testing. The impact force equals several tons of conventional explosives, and there's no radiation or energy signature for detection before impact. Thilnara turned to face Sarah directly. You conduct warfare by throwing metal at your adversaries. The way those words were delivered made it sound barbaric and backward. We've only utilized these weapons in controlled tests and simulation. Humanity hasn't engaged in warfare for nearly 6 decades. These are strictly defensive. Defensive, Thilnara repeated, making the word sound like an accusation. I see. Please continue. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as they proceeded. When Rodriguez showed them the nuclear warheads secured in storage, Thilnara actually recoiled. Technician Grex made a chittering sound translated as disgust. You still employ fission weapons? Grex asked incredulously. Uncontrolled nuclear chain reactions as armament. They're a final option, Sarah said, her patience wearing thin. We haven't detonated a nuclear weapon in conflict for over 2 centuries. These provide deterrence, nothing more. Deterrence, Soren pulsed. Against whom? Your own kind? The inspection concluded in the conference room. Sarah had assembled her senior staff while the evaluation team conferred among themselves through whispers and light pulses. Finally, Thilnara stood to address the humans. We've finished evaluating human technology. Your species has demonstrated functional faster-than-light capability through rudimentary wormhole generation. Your power systems are adequate, though inefficient, depending on nuclear fusion rather than zero-point extraction or quantum tapping. Your weapon systems are frankly alarming. Sarah's jaw tightened. Alarming? You utilize kinetic projectiles, explosive chemical reactions, and unshielded fission devices. Your defensive capabilities consist of basic armor plating and point defense system. You possess no energy shields, no matter disintegration beams, no particle weapons, no gravitational manipulation. You fight as your ancestors did thousands of years ago, by throwing rocks. Only now those rocks move faster. Dr. Rodriguez stood abruptly, his face flushed. Our weapons deliver exceptional results. The mathematics is undeniable. Kinetic energy increases with velocity squared. Our railguns deliver more destructive force than most energy weapons could achieve with comparable power consumption. Effective against whom? Thilnara asked. Yourself. In council space, every civilized species has progressed beyond such crude methods. We employ energy shields that render kinetic weapons obsolete. We teleport forces directly to targets, bypassing physical defenses. We manipulate matter at quantum level. Your weapons would be playthings against any council military. Silence fell over the room. Sarah could see anger and humiliation on her crew's faces. They'd worked tirelessly, sacrificed tremendously to reach the star. Now this crystalline alien was dismissing centuries of human achievement as primitive nonsense. We came peacefully, Sarah said quietly. We came to learn, to share, to join the galactic community. Are you saying we're unwelcome? Thilnara's surface rippled. The Galactic Council welcomes all sentient species. However, protocols exist. Based on our evaluation, humanity is classified as Category 7, a pre-civilized species. This classification includes certain restrictions for your protection and council space stability. What kind of restrictions? Ambassador Jiang Wei asked. He'd remained silent throughout the inspection, but now his diplomatic training engaged. Soren pulsed soft blue, which Sarah understood meant official pronouncement. Humanity will be confined to your home system and any colony worlds you currently occupy within 10 light-years of Earth. You're prohibited from establishing new colonies beyond this boundary. Trade with council species will be restricted to approved goods and technology. You may not purchase or acquire military technology from council members. These restrictions remain until humanity demonstrates significant technological advancement, particularly in warfare and defense areas. You're caging us, Marcus said. Trapping us. We're protecting you, Thilnara replied, and protecting the council. A species still using kinetic weapons isn't ready for the broader galaxy. The Galactic Council has endured for 12,000 years because we maintain certain standards. When humanity abandons its barbaric methods and develops proper civilization-level technology, you'll be welcomed as equals. Until then, this is our offer. Ambassador Jiang Wei stood, his composure perfect despite the anger Sarah knew he felt. I formally protest this classification. Humanity's technological approach may differ from yours, but that doesn't make it inferior or barbaric. We request a full council hearing to appeal this decision. Your protest is documented, Thilnara said. A hearing will be scheduled within the next galactic year. Until then, restrictions stand. We'll escort you back to the restricted space boundary. I suggest you use this time considering your species' path forward. Abandon your primitive weapons. Embrace civilized people's technologies. Then perhaps we can meet again as equals. The evaluation team departed without ceremony. Sarah stood on the bridge as Vilnathi ships formed around the Endeavor, guiding them back toward human space. The crew remained silent, their joy at first contact transformed into bitter disappointment. "Captain," Marcus said softly. "Orders." Sarah watched the alien ships on her screen. They were beautiful, elegant, far more advanced than anything humanity could build. But they were also arrogant, dismissive, blind to anything outside their narrow view of civilization. She thought about the railgun in the weapons bay, the product of human ingenuity and determination. She thought about the nuclear warheads, terrible weapons humanity had learned to control. She thought about everything her species had overcome to reach the stars. "Plot a course for Earth," she directed. "Send a coded message ahead to Fleet Command. Inform them we made contact. Tell them it went poorly, and tell them we need to be ready for anything." "Ready for what?" Marcus asked. Sarah's reflection stared back from the dark screen. "For the day we prove them wrong. For the day we show them that humanity's way of reaching for the stars is equally valid. And for the day they realize that calling our weapons primitive doesn't make them less dangerous." The Endeavor turned homeward, carrying news that would transform humanity forever. Behind them the Council ships dispersed, their mission complete. Throughout Council space on vast stations and countless worlds, humanity became a footnote, a curious species too backward to matter. The Vilnathi filed their report and moved on. The Sarani returned to their meditation pools. The Haltirans went back to their laboratory. None of them considered that dismissing humanity might be a mistake. None wondered what a species that survived by fighting with rocks and fire might do when told their weapons were obsolete. None asked what would happen when humanity decided to prove the Council wrong. That question would be answered soon enough. But first, humanity had work to do. They'd been called primitive, barbaric, pre-civilized. They'd been caged, restricted, and dismissed. Sarah knew her species well enough to predict what came next. Humanity never responded well to being told something was impossible. The galaxy was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 5 years transformed everything. The humiliation of first contact burned through humanity like wildfire. Every nation, every colony, every person who heard the story of how the Galactic Council dismissed humanity as primitive, felt identical anger and determination. Earth's factories operated continuously. Research stations from Luna to Europa worked on projects that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. Humanity was preparing for something, though no one would say exactly what. The 3 colony worlds beyond Earth flourished. New Terra, with its Earth-like climate and breathable atmosphere, now held 3 million inhabitants. Olympus Station, orbiting a helium-3-rich gas giant, had grown from a mining outpost to a thriving industrial center. Kepler 4-2b, the furthest colony at 9.8 light-years from Earth, was humanity's agricultural jewel, feeding the growing population scattered across the stars. Fleet Admiral James Kowalski stood on the observation deck of Tau Station, watching construction yards below. 43 warships were under construction, each larger and more heavily armed than the Endeavor. The Council had restricted humanity to 10 light-years from Earth. They'd said nothing about building defenses within that sphere. Humanity had exploited that loophole fully. "Admiral, we have urgent transmission from New Terra," his aide announced. "It's Governor Chen. Priority Alpha." Kowalski felt his stomach drop. Priority Alpha meant one thing: attack. He hurried to the communication center, his mind racing through scenarios. Pirate, some rogue faction from Council space, an accident. Governor Chen's face appeared on the screen, and Kowalski immediately knew it was worse than imagined. She was in a combat bunker, alarms wailing behind her. Her usually calm face was pale and stressed. "Admiral, we're under attack." Alien forces appeared in orbit. They didn't come through any wormhole or jump point. They just materialized. Thousands of them. They're teleporting down to the surface right now. "What species?" Kowalski demanded. "Identify them." "They're insectoid, 8-limbed, about 2 meters tall. Chitin armor, mandibles, compound eyes. They're not Council species we recognize." "Wait, we're getting transmission." The screen split. A creature appeared that made Kowalski's skin crawl. It was indeed insectoid, but massive, its carapace covered in scarred armor plate. Its mandibles clicked as it spoke, the translator rendering its words in cold mechanical tones. "Humans of New Terra, I am War Prime Zixthak of the Kresh Dominion. Your world is now property of the Kresh. You have 1 cycle to evacuate all personnel and resources. Any resistance will be met with immediate extermination. Your species is weak. Your territory undefended. The Council has declared you unworthy of protection. We claim what is ours by right of strength. The transmission ended. Governor Chen's face filled the screen again. Admiral, they're landing everywhere. 40,000 of them, maybe more. They have energy weapons, personal shields, and they're teleporting in faster than we can respond. Our PDF forces are engaging, but their weapons aren't working as expected. The energy beams cut through our armor like paper. Kowalski's mind raced. 40,000 enemy troops with teleportation and energy weapons against a planetary defense force of maybe 5,000 equipped with conventional arms. It should be a massacre. Should be. Governor, deploy contingency 7. Everything we've been preparing. Don't hold anything back. Chen's eyes widened. Everything? Are you certain? The Council said our weapons were primitive. Let's demonstrate how primitive they really are. I'm sending the 3rd Fleet. They'll arrive in 8 hours. Hold until then. Understood. New Terra. Kowalski turned to his staff. Battle stations. Deploy 3rd Fleet to New Terra immediately. Send a message to Earth. The Kresh Dominion has declared war on humanity. Request authorization for unrestricted engagement. The answer came back in 3 minutes. Short and decisive. Show them what humans can do. On New Terra, Colonel Marcus Webb stood in Firebase Delta's command center, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Yes, the same Marcus Webb who'd served on the Endeavor 5 years ago. He'd transferred to the Colonial Defense Force specifically for moments like this. The Kresh were learning that humanity's primitive weapons had advantages the Council never considered. The Kresh troops materialized in precise formations, their teleportation technology bypassing all conventional defenses. They wore personal energy shields, shimmering fields designed to absorb and dissipate directed energy weapons. Against the plasma rifles and laser cannons of Council species, those shields were nearly impenetrable. Against a hypersonic tungsten slug traveling at 30,000 meters per second, they were useless. The railgun emplacements opened fire. The Kresh never heard the shots coming. Kinetic weapons had no energy signature, no particle beam to detect, no charging cycle to warn of incoming fire. Just solid metal moving faster than sound, faster than most sensors could track. The tungsten slugs tore through Kresh shields as if they didn't exist, because the shields were designed for energy, not mass. The first volley killed 300 Kresh in the opening second. Their shields sparked and failed, their armor crumpled like tin foil, and their bodies were reduced to pulp by kinetic impacts. The survivors scattered, their compound eyes wide with shock. Target the concentrations, Marcus ordered. Don't let them regroup. Missile batteries, fire at will. The missiles were another surprise. Humanity had refined chemical propulsion to an art form over centuries. The missiles weren't guided by sophisticated AI or quantum targeting systems. They were essentially dumb rockets with heavy explosive payloads and simple guide. But they were fast, numerous, and the Kresh teleportation jammers couldn't stop them, because there was nothing to jam. The missiles didn't care about shield frequencies or energy signatures. They just exploded. Across the planet the pattern repeated. The Kresh would teleport in, confident in their superiority. The railguns would open fire, shredding their formations. The missiles would follow up, destroying anything that survived. When Kresh troops tried taking cover in buildings, humanity deployed its oldest weapon, artillery. Massive shells arced through the air and smashed into Kresh positions, bringing down entire structures. War Prime Zixthak watched from his command ship in orbit, his mandibles clicking in agitation. What's happening? Why are our shields failing? His technician, a smaller Kresh with lighter Chatin, worked frantically at his console. The humans aren't using energy weapons, they're using kinetic projectiles. Solid matter accelerated to extreme speeds. Our shields can't stop them because there's no energy to dissipate. That's impossible. No civilized species uses such crude weapons. The Council assured us the humans were primitive, weak, unable to defend themselves. The Council was correct about one thing. War Prime. The humans are primitive. But primitive doesn't mean ineffective. Zixthak slammed his forelimbs on the console. Deploy more troops. Overwhelm them with numbers. We committed 40,000 warriors to this attack. Use them all. But the numbers were already turning against the Kresh. Every minute, more Kresh fell to railgun fire, missile strikes, and artillery barrages. The humans had another advantage the Kresh hadn't anticipated. Experience. Humanity had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other with kinetic weapons. They knew how to lead a target, predict movement, maximize damage with minimal resources. The Kresh had spent centuries relying on technology to do their fighting. When that technology failed, they didn't know how to adapt. Colonel Webb watched the tactical display as Kresh numbers dwindled. 38,000, 35,000, 30,000. The enemy was retreating to their landing zones, trying to teleport back to their ships. But humanity had planned for that too. Activate the inhibitor fields. Marcus ordered. Around each major Kresh concentration, human forces activated devices carefully positioned during the battle's first minutes. They were crude by Council standards, just powerful electromagnetic generators designed to create interference. They didn't block teleportation entirely, but they slowed it down, made it imprecise, caused delays. Long enough for the railguns to acquire targets, long enough for the missiles to reach them. The Kresh trapped on the surface realized they were being slaughtered. Some tried surrendering. Marcus ordered his troops to accept them, though he kept the Kresh under heavy guard. Others fought to the last, their energy weapons finally finding targets, as human forces moved in to secure the perimeter. Humanity took losses. 300 soldiers died in the battle. Another 500 were wounded. It was the highest casualty count humanity had suffered in combat in over a century. But when the sun set on New Terra that day, 38,000 Kresh lay dead or captured. Only 2,000 made it back to their War Prime Zixtac sat in his command chair, his body trembling with shock and rage. His glorious Dominion forces, unstoppable against every Council species they'd faced, had been decimated by a pre-civilized species using weapons from their own barbaric past. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was disaster. Withdraw, he ordered. Take us back to Kresh space. We must report this to the Dominion Council. As the Kresh ships vanished into wormholes, Admiral Kowalski's Third Fleet arrived in orbit. They found a planet battered but unbowed, its people victorious, its enemies fleeing. Kowalski stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Gettysburg, and watched footage from the surface battles. He saw the railguns firing, the missiles launching, the artillery pounding Kresh position. He saw human soldiers using tactics that were ancient when Rome fell, updated with modern technology but fundamentally unchanged. Send a message to all Council frequencies, Kowalski ordered. Full broadcast. I want everyone to see this. His communications officer nodded. Ready, Admiral. Kowalski faced the camera, his expression hard. This is Fleet Admiral James Kowalski of the United Earth Coalition. Today the Kresh Dominion attacked New Terra, killing 17 civilians and wounding 43 others before our defense forces could respond. The Kresh War Prime informed us that the Galactic Council had declared humanity unworthy of protection. He thought this made us easy prey. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Kresh deployed 40,000 warriors with personal shields, energy weapons and teleportation technologies the Council called civilized and advanced. They were confident in their superiority. They expected us to fall before them like all the other species they'd conquered. Another pause. The bridge was silent, every eye on their admiral. The Kresh lost 38,000 warriors in 47 minutes. We used railguns, missiles, artillery and small arms fire weapons the Council called primitive and barbaric. Weapons the Council said were obsolete. The Kresh survivors are fleeing back to their space, and we have 2,000 prisoners who will tell their people what happened here today. Kowalski leaned closer to the camera. So let me be very clear to the Galactic Council and any other species watching this. You told us our weapons were primitive. You called us barbaric and pre-civilized. You restricted us to our own space because you thought we were weak. You were wrong. Our weapons work just fine. Kinetic weapons don't care about energy shields. Missiles don't care about teleportation jammer. Artillery doesn't care about advanced sensors. And human determination doesn't care about your classifications. He straightened. The Kresh learned this today. We hope it's a lesson others will remember. Humanity doesn't seek war. We came to the stars in peace, but we will defend our worlds, our people and our right to exist with railguns, missiles and any other weapon we deem necessary. If that makes us primitive in your eyes, so be it. We'll be primitive and alive rather than civilized and conquered. The transmission ended. Across Council space, on 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 ships, aliens watched the footage of the Battle of New Terra. They saw Kresh warriors falling by the hundreds, their shields useless, their confidence shattered. They saw human weapons crude and simple by Council standards, proving devastatingly effective. They heard Admiral Kowalski's words and realized the Council had made a terrible miscalculation. Humanity wasn't weak, they were different, and different, as the Kresh had learned, could be far more dangerous than anyone anticipated. In the crystal spires of the Council's home world, Representative Thulnara watched the same footage with growing dread. The Vilnathi had dismissed humanity as primitive and boxed them into their home system. Now that boxed species had just defeated one of the galaxy's most aggressive military powers using the exact weapons the Council had mocked. "We may have made an error," Thulnara said to the Council chamber. "The humans are more formidable than we assessed." Council Arbiter Velmoth, an ancient being of pure energy, pulsed with what might have been agreement or reproach. "You classified them as Category 7. You told them their weapons were obsolete. You restricted their expansion and offered them no path forward except to abandon their methods and adopt ours. And now we see the result. What do you suggest?" Thulnara asked. "We watch," Velmoth said. "We wait. And we hope the Kresh are wise enough not to retaliate. Because if they do and if the humans respond in kind, we may be witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented. A primitive species that fights like no civilized force can predict or counter. A species we dismissed, caged and humiliated. A species that now knows exactly how little the Council thinks of them." The Council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. On New Terra, humanity celebrated their victory. On Earth, Fleet Command began planning for the next battle. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Kresh Dominion War Council gathered to discuss their humiliation and plan their revenge. The galaxy was changing. The old order, 12,000 years of Council supremacy, was beginning to crack. And at the heart of that crack was a species armed with railguns, missiles and a determination forged in the fires of being called primitive. The Council's glory had seemed eternal. But eternity, as humanity was about to prove, was a relative term. The Kresh Dominion didn't accept humiliation well. For 6 months, their space fell silent as they regrouped and adapted. Humanity used that time wisely. The victory at New Terra had proven their weapons worked, but it had also revealed vulnerability. The Kresh energy weapons had killed 300 soldiers before being neutralized. If the enemy adapted their shields to stop kinetic weapons, humanity needed to be ready. Dr. Amara Okafor stood in the research facility beneath Olympus Station, staring at the device on the examination table. It was a Kresh teleportation unit, salvaged from one of the prisoners captured during the battle. The crystalline matrix at its core pulsed with faint energy, a technology humanity had only dreamed of months ago. Now they were taking it apart, learning its secrets, and preparing to turn the enemy's strength into humanity's advantage. "Tell me you've made progress," Admiral Kowalski said, entering the lab with Colonel Webb at his side. The Admiral had personally overseen the interrogation of Kresh prisoners, offering them good treatment in exchange for information. Many had cooperated, still shocked by their defeat and afraid of being returned to their own people in disgrace. Amara smiled. "More than progress, Admiral. We understand it now. Teleportation works by creating a quantum tunnel between 2 points in space, essentially folding reality so that here and there become the same place for a fraction of a second. The Kresh use organic crystals grown in zero gravity to generate the field. We don't have those crystals, but we have something better. Better than alien technology?" Marcus asked. "Human stubbornness," Amara said. "We can't grow the crystals, so we synthesized an artificial version using diamond matrices and quantum processors. It's crude compared to the Kresh version. Shorter range, requires more power, and the tunnel is less stable. But it works." Kowalski felt his pulse quicken. "How short is the range?" "About 500 kilometers, Amara said. "Not enough to teleport between ships or planets, but enough to teleport within a battle space. Enough to put things exactly where we want them." Marcus caught on immediately. "You're not thinking about teleporting troops." "Hell no," Amara said. "Teleporting living things is dangerous. The Kresh have been doing it for centuries and still lose about 1% of their troops to accidents. Teleportation sickness, materialization errors, quantum drift. No, we're going to do what humanity does best. We're going to teleport ammunition." She brought up a simulation on her screen. It showed a human warship engaging a Kresh vessel. Instead of firing a railgun slug across space, giving the enemy time to detect and evade, the ship teleported the slug directly into the target's path. By the time the enemy sensors registered the threat, the projectile was already hitting them. "That's brilliant," Kowalski said. "No travel time, no warning, no chance to dodge." "It gets better," Amara said. "We can also teleport mines, missiles, even proximity charges. Imagine a Kresh ship approaching and suddenly being surrounded by a field of explosive devices that weren't there a second ago. Or a cluster of tungsten rods appearing inside their shield perimeter, too close for the shields to activate in time. Can we manufacture these teleporters quickly enough?" Kowalski asked. Because I have a feeling we're going to need them soon. As if on cue, the facility's alarm system activated. A lieutenant burst into the lab. Admiral, we have multiple wormhole signatures appearing throughout the system. It's the Kresh. They're back, and they brought a lot more ships. The Battle of Olympus Station began 3 hours later. War Prime Zixthak had returned with 200 warships and 500,000 warriors, 10 times the force that attacked New Terra. This time, the Kresh came prepared. Their intelligence indicated that human kinetic weapons bypassed energy shields, so they'd adapted. Every Kresh soldier now wore layered armor plates, designed specifically to stop high-velocity projectiles. Their ships had been fitted with additional armor and point defense systems, calibrated to intercept railgun slugs. This time humans die, Zixthak announced to his fleet. We've adapted to their primitive weapons. Our shields now incorporate particle fields that will slow and stop their projectiles. We won't be caught unprepared again. Olympus Station holds 2 million humans and the industrial capacity to arm their entire species. We will capture or destroy it for the Dominion. The Kresh fleet moved into position, their ships arranged in a pattern that maximized shield coverage and minimized vulnerable angles. Zixthak felt confident. The humans had surprised them once with their crude but effective weapons. It wouldn't happen again. Admiral Kowalski watched the enemy fleet approach from the bridge of the Gettysburg, now reinforced with 30 additional warships and the new teleportation weapon systems. Olympus Station's defensive platforms had been upgraded with the same technology. 2 million civilians sheltered in the station's core, protected by layers of armor and structural reinforcement. If the Kresh wanted them, they'd have to go through the entirety of the human defense fleet. All ships. This is Admiral Kowalski. The enemy has adapted their shields to counter our railguns. They think this makes them safe. Let's show them how wrong they are. Engage when in range. New protocols. New weapons. Let's make history again. The two fleets met at the outer edge of the system. The Kresh opened fire first, their energy weapons lancing out across the void. Human ships took hits, their armor scoring and melting under the directed energy beams. 2 frigates lost shields and fell back, venting atmosphere. But the human fleet didn't retreat. They pushed forward, closing the distance. At 50,000 kilometers, the railguns opened fire. The Kresh were ready, their new shields activated, particle fields forming barriers that slowed the incoming slugs. The tungsten projectiles hit the shields and decelerated, their kinetic energy dissipating. Many were stopped entirely. Others penetrated but with reduced velocity, causing only minor damage to the armored Kresh hulls. Zixthak's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. You see, we've negated their primary weapon. All ships advance. Prepare to deploy troops to the station. Then the first teleportation strike hit. A Kresh battleship suddenly found itself with a 500-kilogram tungsten rod inside its shield perimeter, traveling at 5% the speed of light. The slug had been accelerated by a railgun on a human ship, then teleported to point-blank range. By the time the Kresh sensors detected it, the rod had already punched through the battleship's hull, through 3 decks, and into the reactor core. The battleship exploded. The Kresh fleet recoiled in shock as more teleportation strikes materialized. Tungsten rods, missile clusters, proximity mines, all appearing inside shield ranges where defenses couldn't react in time. The Kresh point defense systems, calibrated to track incoming projectiles, were useless against threats that appeared instantaneously. What is this? Zixthak screamed. How are their weapons bypassing our shields? His technician worked frantically, trying to understand. They're using teleportation, War Prime. They're transporting their projectiles directly to us. Our shields can't stop something that appears inside their range. That's impossible. Teleportation is our technology. The humans don't have teleportation. They do now, War Prime. The battle became a massacre. Human ships advanced, firing railguns to keep the Kresh shields active and occupied, then teleporting larger projectiles through the shields to strike vulnerable points. Olympus Station's defensive platforms contributed their own teleportation strikes, blanketing the Kresh fleet with explosives and kinetic kill vehicles that appeared without warning. The Kresh tried to adapt. They dispersed their fleet, thinking to make targeting more difficult. The humans responded by teleporting cluster munitions that spread out after materialization, creating fields of explosives impossible to evade. The Kresh tried jamming, using their own teleportation inhibitors. The human weapons still worked because they weren't teleporting across vast distances where jamming was effective, but rather short tactical jumps that required less power and were harder to block. Zixthak realized with growing horror that his fleet was being destroyed. 30 ships gone in the first 10 minutes, 50 ships after 20 minutes. The humans were using a combination of Kresh technology and their own kinetic weapons to create something neither species had faced before. Instantaneous, unstoppable firepower. Deploy the ground forces, Zixthak ordered in desperation. Teleport all warriors to the station. Overwhelm their defenses with numbers. If we can't destroy the station from orbit, we'll take it from within. 500,000 Kresh warriors began materializing throughout Olympus Station. The human defenders were ready. Colonel Webb had positioned his troops at every likely teleportation point, using predictive algorithms derived from the Kresh prisoners' information. The moment Kresh warriors began appearing, they were met with concentrated fire from prepared positions. But 500,000 was too many. The humans fought valiantly, but the Kresh had numbers on their side. They pushed deeper into the station, their energy weapons cutting through defensive positions. Civilians fled to the core shelters as the battle raged through the corridor. Human casualties mounted. 100 dead, then 200, then 500. Dr. Amara Okafor watched the tactical display from the research facility, now sealed off from the fighting but surrounded by Kresh forces. She had one prototype device left, a teleportation unit far more powerful than anything the fleet had deployed. It had been designed for emergency evacuation, capable of teleporting large masses across longer distances. She hadn't tested it fully. The risks were enormous, but as she watched human soldiers dying to buy time for civilians to escape, she made a decision. Override the safety protocols, she told her assistant. Maximum power. I need one jump with everything we have, Doctor. That could tear the station apart if it goes wrong. If it goes right, it could save everyone. Do it. She plotted the coordinates carefully, targeting the largest concentration of Kresh forces in the station's main concourse, where 10,000 warriors had gathered, preparing to push into the civilian shelters. The teleportation matrix hummed to life, drawing power from the station's core reactor. Amara entered the final command and prayed to a god she wasn't sure she believed in. In the Tau station construction yards, a 500-ton tungsten cylinder designed as ballast for a new warship suddenly vanished. It reappeared in the exact center of the Kresh concentration on Olympus Station, traveling at terminal velocity despite having been stationary a moment before. The laws of conservation of momentum briefly broke down in the quantum tunnel, and the result was catastrophic. The impact vaporized everything within 100 meters. The shock wave propagated through the concourse, killing or stunning every Kresh warrior in the area. The station structure groaned but held, the reinforced construction absorbing the impact that would have destroyed a lesser facility. 10,000 Kresh died instantly. The survivors, scattered throughout the station, realized they'd lost their numerical advantage and began retreating to their teleportation points. In orbit, Admiral Kowalski saw the Kresh fleet beginning to withdraw, their ground forces evacuating in disarray. He didn't let them go easily. The human fleet pursued, teleporting mines into the retreat path, forcing the Kresh ships to scatter and exposing their engines to railgun fire. By the time the last Kresh vessel jumped to wormhole transit, only 89 ships remained of the 200 that had attacked. The Gettysburg's bridge erupted in cheers. They'd done it again. Against overwhelming numbers and adapted technology, humanity had prevailed by doing what they did best, taking enemy advantages and turning them into weaknesses. The Kresh had teleportation, so humans learned teleportation and used it to deliver kinetic weapons. The Kresh had shields, so humans bypassed them. The Kresh had numbers, so humans used superior tactics and positioning. Colonel Webb stood in the ruins of the main concourse, looking at the crater where Dr. Okafor's teleportation strike had landed. His uniform was scorched, his face covered in soot, but he was smiling. They'd held. 2 million civilians had survived. The station was damaged but intact, and the enemy was fleeing. "Sir, we have Dr. Okafor on comms," his lieutenant said. "She says she needs to be arrested for unauthorized use of experimental weaponry and reckless endangerment of station integrity." Marcus laughed, a sound of pure relief and exhaustion. "Tell her she's getting a medal instead, and then tell her I want 10 more of those devices built as soon as possible." Across the galaxy, footage of the Battle of Olympus Station spread even faster than the first. The Council watched as humanity once again defeated a superior force, this time by stealing the enemy's own technology and combining it with their kinetic weapons to create something unprecedented. They saw the Kresh fleet broken and running. They saw evidence that humanity could adapt, innovate, and overcome any challenge. In the council chambers, Representative Thanara no longer sat in a position of authority. The Vilmothi had been demoted after the first human victory. Now Thanara watched from the lower seats as Council Arbiter Vilmoth addressed the assembly. Twice now the humans have defeated forces that should have overwhelmed them. They've proven their weapons are not obsolete, merely different. They've also proven they can learn our technologies and integrate them with their own methods. The question before us is simple. Do we continue to treat them as primitive, or do we acknowledge that our assessment was flawed? A Sarani representative pulsed. They stole Kresh technology. That violates the technology transfer accords. They took it from prisoners and salvage, Vilmoth corrected. Just as any species would. And they didn't simply copy it. They adapted it, improved it for their purposes, and used it in ways the Kresh never imagined. That's not theft, that's innovation. Thanara stood, their crystalline form dim with shame. I was wrong. I dismissed the humans as primitive because their methods differed from ours. I didn't consider that different doesn't mean inferior. I asked the Council's permission to travel to human space and offer a formal apology. Denied, Vilmoth said. The damage has been done. The humans know how the Council views them. An apology now would seem empty, a political gesture motivated by fear rather than genuine respect. No, we will watch and wait, and when the humans are ready, when they've proven themselves beyond any doubt, then we will approach them as equals. Not before. The Council session ended with no resolution, no change in humanity's status, and no relief from the restricts that boxed them into their home system. But something had changed nonetheless. The galaxy no longer saw humanity as a curiosity or a joke. They saw a species that fought with weapons older than some civilizations, that adapted enemy technology in weeks rather than years, and that refused to accept defeat no matter the odds. Admiral Kowalski stood on the observation deck of Olympus Station, watching repair crews work on the damage from the battle. His fleet had taken losses: 7 ships destroyed, 15 damaged, 1,500 soldiers dead, 4,000 wounded. But they'd won. The Kresh had learned that adapting to human weapons only meant humans would find new ways to make those weapons effective. Admiral, message from Fleet Command, his aide said. The Kresh Dominion has officially requested a ceasefire and negotiation. They've also filed a formal complaint with the Council about our use of teleportation weapons, claiming we violated technology transfer laws. Kowalski smiled grimly. Tell Fleet Command I recommend we accept the ceasefire, but make it clear we reserve the right to use any weapons we deem necessary for our defense. As for the Council complaint, they can file it wherever they want. We didn't steal anything, we learned, we adapted, and we survived. If that bothers them, they should have thought of that before calling us primitive. The aides saluted and left. Kowalski remained at the window, watching the stars. Humanity had won 2 battles, but the war for respect and recognition was far from over. The Council still classified them as pre-civilized. Other species still looked at human weapons with disdain. And somewhere out there, someone was probably planning to test humanity again, to see if the victories were luck or skill. They would find out soon enough. Humanity had railguns, missiles, and now teleportation. They had determination, adaptability, and a refusal to accept defeat. They'd been dismissed, restricted, and attacked, and every time they'd come back stronger. The galaxy was learning a lesson the hard way. Never mistake different for weak. Never confuse primitive methods with primitive minds. And never ever back a human into a corner and expect them to give up without a fight. The Council's glory was beginning to crack, and humanity, armed with stolen teleporters and unstoppable railguns, was widening that crack with every battle, every victory, and every moment they refused to bow to species that thought themselves superior. The shock was just beginning. The news of humanity's second victory rippled through Council space like a shockwave. Within days, 6 minor species that had been classified as Category 7, just like humanity, sent quiet messages to Earth. They wanted to know how humanity had overcome their restrictions. They wanted to learn. They wanted hope that they too could break free from the Council's suffocating classifications. Ambassador Jiang Wei sat in his office on the lunar diplomatic station, reading the messages with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Humanity had never sought to be revolutionaries or troublemakers. They'd come to the stars looking for friends, for knowledge, for a place in the galactic community. Instead, they'd been dismissed and caged. Now other caged species were looking to them for leadership. This is going to make the Council very nervous, his aide said, reading over his shoulder. Good, Jiang Wei said. They should be nervous. They've maintained control for 12,000 years by deciding which species deserve advancement and which don't. We've proven their system is flawed. If other species follow our example, the entire Council structure could collapse. Is that what we want? Jiang Wei considered the question carefully. I want humanity to be treated as equals. I want our children to grow up in a galaxy where their worth is judged by their character and achievements, not by whether their weapons match some arbitrary standard of civilization. If that requires the Council to change or fall, then so be it. The decision was made. Humanity would accept military consultation requests from the 6 species. They wouldn't provide weapons or direct military support, but they would share tactics, strategies, and the philosophy behind their approach to warfare. They would plant the seeds of change throughout Council space. The Council didn't react well to this development. Within a month, an emergency session was called. Representative Thanara, stripped of most authority but still present, watched as the hardliners seized control of the discussion. At their head was Councillor Praxnath, a member of the Kaldari species known for their rigid adherence to tradition and hierarchy. The humans have become a destabilizing influence, Praxnath declared, his forearms gesturing dramatically. They refuse to adapt to civilized norms. They spread their barbaric methods to other primitive species. They violate the technological order that has maintained peace for millennia. This cannot be tolerated. What do you propose? Council Arbiter Velmoth asked, the ancient energy being pulsed with what might have been weary. Containment by force, Praxnath said. A coalition fleet to blockade human space, prevent them from spreading their influence further, enforce the restrictions we placed upon them, show the galaxy that the Council's authority cannot be challenged. You propose war against a species that has defeated every military force sent against them, Velmoth asked. The Kresh were one species acting alone. A proper Council fleet with proper coordination and overwhelming force will prevail. The humans may have tricks, but they can't stand against the combined might of 15 Council species. Thallara stood, knowing the words would probably be ignored, but feeling compelled to speak anyway. This is a mistake. The humans have proven adaptable, creative, and determined. They've also shown restraint. They defeated the Kresh decisively but accepted a ceasefire. They could have pursued and destroyed the retreating fleet, but chose not to. They're not the enemy you believe them to be. They're exactly the enemy I believe them to be, Praxnath said. A species that refuses to accept their place, that rejects the wisdom of the Council, that spreads chaos and change wherever they go. We will remind them why the Council has endured for 12,000 years, because we don't tolerate challenges to our authority. The vote was called. 15 species committed ships to the blockade fleet. 22 abstained or voted against the action, but their numbers were insufficient to prevent it. 300 warships representing the most advanced military technology in Council space would assemble at the border of human territory and enforce the containment protocols. Admiral Kowalski received the news while inspecting the new defense platforms at the edge of the human sphere. 300 ships, 15 different species, each with their own technologies and tactics. Energy weapons, particle beams, gravitational manipulators, matter disintegrators, every type of advanced weaponry the Council had developed over thousands of years. It was the largest military force assembled in Council space in over 2 centuries. They're trying to put us back in the box, General Webb said. He'd been promoted after Olympus Station and now commanded all human ground forces, except this time they're using overwhelming force to do it. Analysis, Kowalski asked his tactical officers. It's bad, sir, Commander Lisa Park said. She'd replaced Marcus on the Gettysburg when he transferred to ground command. Even with our teleportation weapons and kinetic advantages, 300 advanced warships are more than we can handle. Our entire fleet is 68 ships. We're outnumbered nearly 5 to 1. Can we evacuate the outer colonies? Kowalski asked. Pull everyone back to Earth and the inner system. Logistically possible, but politically disastrous, Jiang Wei said via video link. If we retreat, we lose credibility with the 6 species that reached out to us. We also lose 3 colony worlds we've spent decades building. And we prove the Council right, that we're weak and unworthy of our independence. Kowalski studied the tactical displays, running scenarios through his mind. Every simulation came back with the same result. Defeat. The human fleet would be destroyed. The colonies would be blockaded or captured, and humanity would be forced back into Category 7 status with even stricter restrictions, unless they found an edge. Something the Council didn't expect. We need to make them not want to fight us, Kowalski said suddenly. We can't win a straight battle, but we can make the cost of victory so high that they decide it's not worth it. How? General Webb asked. Kowalski smiled, but there was no humor in it. We use every dirty trick humanity ever invented. We fight the way our ancestors fought when they were outnumbered and outgunned. We make them remember why primitive species survived long enough to reach the stars. The plan took shape over the next 3 weeks. Every available ship was refitted and rearmed. The civilian yards worked around the clock. building new weapons platforms, defensive satellites, and mobile minefields. Dr. Amara Okafor's team created new applications for teleportation technology that made the previous battles look conservative, and every human colony prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. The Council fleet arrived at the border of human space with great fanfare. Praxnoth commanded from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called Eternal Glory. The fleet arranged itself in a picket line, cutting off access to and from human territory. Their message was broadcast on all frequencies. Humans of Earth and the colonies, this is Counselor Praxnoth speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. You have violated the terms of your Category 7 classification by spreading your military methods to other restricted species. You have stolen technology that was not yours to take. You have refused to adopt civilized standards of warfare and society. By the authority granted to the Council by 12,000 years of galactic stewardship, we hereby enforce full containment. No human ship will be permitted to leave your restricted zone. No outside contact will be allowed until you comply with Council directive. This blockade will remain in place until such time as humanity demonstrates proper civilization or ceases to be a threat to galactic stability. Admiral Kowalski's response was broadcast from the Gettysburg, positioned at the head of the human fleet. Counselor Praxnoth, this is Fleet Admiral James Kowalski of the United Earth Coalition. We reject your authority to blockade sovereign human territory. We reject your classifications and your restrictions. We came to the stars in peace and were met with contempt. We defended ourselves and were called barbaric. We learned and adapted and were called thieves. We will not accept containment. We will not surrender our independence. If you want to enforce your blockade, you will have to fight for it. And I promise you, Counselor, the cost will be higher than you can imagine. Empty threats from a primitive species. Praxnoth responded. You're outnumbered and outmatched. If you resist, we will destroy your fleet and occupy your worlds. This is your final warning. Then come and take them, Kowalski said, and cut the transmission. The Council fleet advanced. The human fleet didn't meet them head-on. Instead, human ships fell back, drawing the Council forces deeper into human space. Praxnoth, confident in his superiority, ordered his fleet to pursue. He was eager to end this quickly and prove the Council's dominance. The first surprise came when the Council fleet entered a region of space that seemed empty. Suddenly, thousands of objects materialized around them. Small satellites barely the size of a person, each one armed with a single explosive charge and a simple guidance system. They'd been teleported into position the moment the Council fleet entered the kill zone, appearing inside the sphere of ships where their defensive formations were useless. The mines detonated. They weren't powerful enough to destroy capital ships, but they didn't need to be. Each explosion sent shrapnel tearing through space, damaging sensors, weapons arrays, shield generators, and communications equipment. Dozens of ships were crippled in the first wave. The Council fleet recoiled, trying to reform. The second surprise came as they retreated. Human ships that had fallen back suddenly reappeared via short-range teleportation jumps, positioning themselves at optimal firing angles. Railguns opened fire not at the ships themselves but at the space around them. Thousands of tungsten pellets, each the size of a marble, created a debris field that the Council ships had to pass through. At the speeds involved, even a marble-sized projectile could cripple a ship. The Council fleet scattered, trying to avoid the debris and reform their line. That's when the human fleet struck in earnest. Coordinated teleportation attacks placed larger projectiles inside shield perimeters. Missiles appeared at point-blank range too close to intercept. Nuclear-tipped railgun rounds teleported directly into engine sections and reactor core. Praxnoth watched in horror as his fleet took casualties without ever getting close enough to use their weapons effectively. The humans weren't fighting fair. They were using hit-and-run tactics, teleportation ambushes, debris fields, and coordinated strikes that prevented the Council fleet from bringing their superior numbers and firepower to bear. This isn't warfare, Praxnoth said. This is terrorism. This is survival, his tactical officer replied, and they're very good at it. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Council fleet pushed deeper into human space, taking losses at every step. Human ships danced around them, never committing to a direct engagement, always striking from unexpected angles. The teleportation technology, which the Council had dismissed as a stolen trick, proved to be the deciding factor. Human forces could reposition instantly, coordinate attacks across vast distances, and disappear before retaliation could be organized. When the Council fleet finally reached New Terra, they found it transformed into a fortress. Orbital platforms ringed the planet, each armed with railguns and teleportation systems. The planet itself had ground-based defenses that could teleport mines and missiles into orbit, and waiting in defensive positions were 30 human warships. fresh and fully armed, ready for a final stand. Praxnoth had lost 89 ships reaching this point. His fleet was scattered, damaged, and demoralized. His officers were reporting system failures, exhausted crews, and dwindling munition. The humans hadn't destroyed his fleet, but they'd bled it, worn it down, made every kilometer of advance cost blood and metal. "We can still win," Praxnoth said. "We still outnumber them." "At what cost?" his tactical officer asked. "We've already lost nearly a third of our fleet. If we attack New Terra, the casualties will be catastrophic, and even if we win, we'll be too damaged to hold our position. The humans will simply rebuild and attack when we're weak." Praxnoth's pride warred with his tactical sense. He'd promised the Council a quick victory, a demonstration of power that would put humanity in its place. Instead, he'd led 300 ships into a meat grinder and watched them get shredded by a species that shouldn't have been able to resist. "Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Kowalski," the communications officer said. Kowalski's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, his uniform scorched and dirty, but his eyes were hard and determined. "Councillor Praxnoth, you've lost 89 ships and countless lives trying to enforce a blockade we never accepted. Your fleet is damaged and scattered. You're deep in hostile territory with no support and no reinforcements. I'm offering you one chance to end this before more people die. Withdraw your fleet. Return to Council space. We won't pursue. We'll accept a ceasefire and negotiations. But if you continue this attack, I promise you'll lose every remaining ship you have. We will destroy your fleet, and you'll return to the Council in disgrace." "You cannot destroy us," Praxnoth said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We are the Council. We are civilization itself. You're bureaucrats who forgot that civilization is built on respect, not control," Kowalski said. "You're generals who forgot that advanced technology means nothing if you don't know how to use it. You're politicians who believed your own propaganda about superiority. And right now you're a fleet commander who's about to get everyone under his command killed because you're too proud to admit you made a mistake." The words hit harder than any railgun slug. Praxnoth looked at his tactical displays, at the damaged ships, at the exhausted crews, at the fortress of New Terra waiting to inflict more casualties. He looked at the numbers and realized that Kowalski was right. If he ordered the attack, he'd probably take New Terra, but the cost would be the destruction of his fleet and his own death. "I will convene with my fellow commanders," Praxnoth said stiffly. "We'll respond within the hour." The hour felt like eternity. On New Terra, General Webb positioned his troops for a ground battle he hoped wouldn't come. On the Gettysburg, Admiral Kowalski watched the Council fleet and prepared for one more fight. On Earth, billions of people waited to learn if diplomacy or destruction would come next. Finally, the Council fleet began to withdraw, slowly maintaining formation ready to fight if attacked, but clearly retreating. Praxnoth's message was brief. "The Council fleet will return to neutral space to discuss terms for negotiation. This is not surrender. This is a tactical withdrawal. Call it whatever helps you sleep," Kowalski muttered, but he made sure the transmission was off. In public, he accepted the withdrawal gracefully and ordered his fleet not to pursue. The Battle of the Blockade ended without a climactic final confrontation, but its impact was far greater than any battle could have been. The Council had sent 300 ships to enforce their will on humanity. 89 had been destroyed or disabled, and the rest had retreated. The message was clear: humanity could not be contained by force. Across Council space, the 6 species that had reached out to humanity watched and learned. 3 more species sent secret messages asking for consultation. The Category 7 classification, meant to keep primitive species in their place, was beginning to look like a cage that couldn't hold anyone who truly wanted to break free. In the Council chambers, Councillor Praxnoth faced censure and removal from his position. The hardliners who'd supported the blockade found their authority diminished, and Council Arbiter Velmoth, who'd warned against the blockade from the start, called for a special session to discuss the future of Council policy toward humanity. Representative Thanara, watching from the lower seats, felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. The Venathi had been right to question humanity's classification as Category 7, but they'd been catastrophically wrong about why. Humanity wasn't primitive. They were simply different, and that difference had now shaken the foundations of the Council's 12,000-year dominance. The galaxy was changing. The old order was cracking, and at the center of that change was a species armed with railguns and stolen teleporters, who'd proven that respect couldn't be granted or withheld by decree. It had to be earned, and if it couldn't be earned through diplomacy, humanity was more than willing to earn it through combat. The Council's glory had survived for 12 millennia, but glory built on the subjugation of those deemed lesser was fragile, and humanity, whether by intention or accident, had just delivered the first of many blows that would eventually bring that glory crashing down. 6 months after the failed blockade, the galaxy looked very different. The Council hadn't collapsed, but it had fractured. 12 species had formally withdrawn, forming their own coalition called the Independent Systems Alliance. They didn't necessarily agree with humanity on everything, but they agreed that the Council's classification system was unjust and its enforcement methods were tyrannical. Another dozen species remained in the Council but openly questioned its authority. The remaining Council members, now calling themselves the Traditional Council, struggled to maintain relevance. Their military had been humiliated. Their authority had been challenged. Their classifications had been proven arbitrary and unenforceable. Most damaging of all, 3 species formerly classified as Category 7, had risen up using tactics and strategies learned from humanity and successfully overthrown the restrictions placed upon them. The Council's 12,000-year dominance was ending, not with a bang but with a slow, inexorable decline. In the crystal spires of the Council's home world, Representative Thanara stood before the Arbiter's chamber. The Venathi had requested this private audience, knowing that what needed to be said couldn't be spoken in the open council. Venath's energy form pulsed with the deep blue that indicated serious contemplation. "You wish to speak about the humans," Velmoth said. "It wasn't a question." "I wish to speak about our mistakes," Thanara said. "When I first encountered humanity, I saw only their weapons and judged them by that alone. I didn't look at their history, their adaptability, their determination. I classified them as primitive and set in motion a chain of events that has destroyed the Council's unity. I was wrong, and I must make amends. The Traditional Council will never allow you to approach humanity with an apology," Velmoth said. "They see it as weakness, as capitulation to barbarism." "Then I'll leave the Traditional Council," Thanara said. "The Venathi people are divided on this issue, but the majority now believe we should have welcomed humanity rather than caged them. I'll speak for that majority. I'll go to Earth and offer not just an apology but an invitation." "What sort of invitation?" "To join the galactic community as full equals. Not as Category 7, not as provisional members, as leaders of a new order that judges species by their character and achievements, not by whether their technology matches some arbitrary standard. The Council's way has failed. It's time for something new." Velmoth pulsed, the blue shifting to white, the color of decision. "Then go, Thanara. The Arbiters won't stop you. In truth, many of us have waited for someone to take this step. The Council can't reform from within. It needs external pressure. Perhaps humanity and their allies are exactly the pressure we need." 3 weeks later, a Venathi diplomatic ship arrived at Earth orbit. The arrival caused immediate alarm. Venathi vessels hadn't been seen in human space since the first contact evaluation. Admiral Kowalski, now promoted to Chief of Fleet Operations, personally took command of the reception. General Webb joined him, along with Ambassador Zheng Wei and Dr. Amara Okafor, whose teleportation technology had become the foundation of humanity's defensive doctrine. Thanara arrived alone, without guards or military escort. The Venathi stood in the reception chamber of the lunar diplomatic station, its crystalline form shifting through colors that indicated nervousness, regret and hope. When it spoke, its voice was humble in a way that shocked everyone present. Ambassador Zheng Wei, Admiral Kowalski, General Webb, Dr. Okafor, and honored representatives of humanity. "I am Thanara of the Venathi, and I come before you with an apology long overdue. 5 years ago, I evaluated your species and found you unworthy. I called your weapons primitive. I classified you as pre-civilized. I recommended restrictions that denied you the freedom to grow and explore. I was wrong in every possible way." The room was silent. This was unprecedented. Council representatives didn't apologize. They didn't admit mistakes. They certainly didn't humble themselves before species they dismissed as inferior. "Your weapons are not primitive," Thanara continued. "They're effective, devastating, and perfectly suited to your approach to warfare. Your society is not barbaric. It's diverse, adaptable, and far more resilient than many species the Council considers advanced. Your methods are not inferior, they're simply different, and I failed to see that difference as strength rather than weakness." "Why tell us this now?" Zhang Wei asked. His diplomat's instincts told him there was more to this visit than simple apology. "Because the galaxy is changing, and humanity is at the center of that change," Thanara said. 12 species have left the Council because of you. 20 others are considering. The old order is collapsing because you proved it was built on false assumptions. The Council believed that technological advancement followed a single path. That civilization required abandoning certain methods in favor of others. That respect could be allocated by committee rather than earned through action. You've proven all of these beliefs wrong. The Venathi's form shifted to a warm amber color. The Velothi people have voted to leave the traditional council. We're the first of the founding species to do so, and our departure will likely trigger more. We don't wish to join the Independent Systems Alliance as they're primarily focused on independence rather than cooperation. We wish instead to propose something new, a galactic federation built on principles of mutual respect, technological diversity and earned rather than granted authority. We would like humanity to be a founding member alongside the Velothi and any other species willing to embrace these principles. General Webb leaned over to Admiral Kowalski and whispered, "Is this a trap? If it is, it's the most elaborate one I've ever seen." Kowalski whispered back. Dr. Okafor spoke up, her scientist's mind cutting through the diplomatic language to the core issue. "What you're proposing would require the complete dismantling of the Council's power structure. The traditional Council would never accept it. You're essentially asking us to help you start a revolution." "Not a revolution," Thalnara said. "An evolution. The Council has existed for 12,000 years. It's accomplished many good things, but it's also become rigid, hierarchical, and unable to adapt to new realities. Your arrival forced us to confront these flaws. Some species, like the traditional Council members, have chosen denial. Others, like my people, have chosen acceptance and change. We're not asking you to destroy the Council. We're asking you to help build something better." Ambassador Jiang Wei stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth below. He'd spent 5 years fighting for humanity's recognition. 5 years of diplomatic battles, military conflicts, and constant struggle against species that thought themselves superior. Now, one of those species was offering partnership, respect, and the chance to reshape galactic civilization. It felt too good to be true, which meant he needed to examine it carefully. "What would humanity gain from this arrangement?" he asked. "And please be honest. What do you need from us that you can't get elsewhere?" Thalnara's form flickered. A color pattern Jiang Wei had learned meant respect for a difficult question. "Honestly, we need your legitimacy. The Velothi leaving the Council is significant, but we're seen as traitors by the traditional Council and opportunists by the Independent Systems Alliance. If we approach other species alone, they'll question our motive. But if humanity stands with us, species that have watched you fight for your independence, that have seen you defend your principles against overwhelming odds, they'll listen. You've earned something we can't claim: moral authority. You didn't seek to overthrow the Council. You simply refused to accept unjust treatment. That distinction matters." "And what do we gain?" General Webb asked, his military pragmatism showing. "Besides the warm feeling of galactic cooperation, protection through alliance," Thalnara said. "The traditional Council still exists, still has military power, and still views humanity as a threat. The Kresh Dominion, though weakened, harbors deep hatred for you. There are other species, some you haven't encountered, that see your rise as a challenge to their own interest. Alone, humanity is strong but vulnerable. With allies who possess technologies you lack, energy weapons you haven't developed, shield systems you haven't encountered, you become much harder to threaten." "You're saying we complete each other," Dr. Okafor said with a slight smile. "Your advanced technology and our kinetic warfare combined would create something unprecedented." "Precisely," Thalnara said. "Your railguns and teleportation hybrids are devastating against energy-based defenses. Our particle shields and disintegrator beams are effective against physical armor. Together we could field a military that has no weakness, no blind spot that enemies could exploit. But more importantly, we could build a civilization that doesn't require military dominance to maintain order. One based on cooperation, shared innovation, and genuine respect." The debate lasted 3 days. The human leadership was divided. Some, like General Webb, were suspicious of Council species bearing gifts, no matter how sincere they seemed. Others, like Dr. Okafor, saw the potential for incredible technological advancement through cooperation. Ambassador Jiang Wei found himself in the middle, trying to balance caution with opportunity. Finally, they put it to a vote among Earth's governing coalition and the 3 colony governments. The result was narrow but decisive. Humanity would accept the Velothi proposal with conditions. There would be no hierarchical structure in the new federation. No species would have veto power over others. Technology sharing would be mutual and voluntary. And most importantly, no species would be required to abandon their traditional weapons or methods unless they chose to do so. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Humanity and the Velothi, the species that had first dismissed them, were forming a new alliance. Within weeks, 7 other species requested to join the nascent federation. Within months, that number grew to 23. The new organization called itself the Galactic Coalition for Cooperative Progress. But everyone simply called it the Coalition. The traditional council watched with growing alarm as their influence dwindled. Councillor Praxnoth, who'd survived his disgrace through political maneuvering, rallied the hardliners for one final attempt to reassert council authority. But the attempt fell apart before it began. 3 more founding species announced their departure from the council, and the military forces that remained were insufficient to threaten the coalition's combined strength. On the bridge of his flagship, now renamed the Unity, Admiral Kowalski watched as the first joint human-Venathi patrol began. Human ships armed with railguns and teleportation systems flew alongside Venathi vessels with energy shields and particle cannon. The crews trained together, learning each other's tactics and technologies. It was strange, uncomfortable at times, but it worked. Picking up a distress signal, Commander Park reported, "It's a Kresh vessel. Looks like they've been attacked by pirates. Heavy damage. Life support failing." Kowalski felt the old anger rise. The Kresh had attacked New Terra, killed human civilians, and forced 2 brutal battles before accepting defeat. Part of him wanted to leave them to their fate. But he was no longer just a military commander defending human territory. He was now a coalition officer, responsible for maintaining the principles they'd founded their new alliance upon. "Send a rescue team," he ordered. "Human and Venathi both. Let's show them what cooperation looks like." The rescue took 6 hours. The Kresh survivors, including a minor functionary from their diplomatic corps, were brought aboard the Unity. They were terrified, expecting execution or imprisonment. Instead, they received medical treatment, food, and comfortable quarters. When the Kresh diplomat asked why they were being helped, Kowalski's answer was simple: "Because that's what civilized species do. We judge you by your actions today, not by what your government did years ago. If you want to hate us, that's your choice. But we won't abandon people in need just because their species once declared war on us." The Kresh diplomat said nothing, but Kowalski saw something shift in the alien's compound eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or shame, or the beginning of respect. When the Kresh were returned to their own territory, they carried with them a story that would spread through the Dominion and beyond. Meanwhile, the Kresh Dominion itself was collapsing. The military disasters against humanity had triggered internal strife. Reformist factions, tired of aggressive expansion and military rule, rose up against the warrior castes. Civil war erupted. The galaxy watched as one of its most feared military powers tore itself apart from within. War Prime Zixthak, now in exile after being blamed for the defeats, watched from a small station on the edge of Kresh space. He'd lost everything: his command, his honor, his position, but he'd gained something unexpected: perspective. He sent a message to Admiral Kowalski, encoded in private. "I judged your species by your tools and called them primitive. I judged your methods and called them barbaric. I thought advanced technology meant inevitable victory. I was wrong. Your species survived by adapting, by using every advantage available, by refusing to accept defeat even when outmatched. That's not primitive. That's the essence of what allows species to reach the stars and thrive among them. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that you taught me something my own people never could. That wisdom isn't the same as technology, and strength isn't the same as superiority." Kowalski read the message 3 times. He didn't share it widely, but he did save it. Someday historians would want to know how this era had felt to those who lived through it. Zixthak's words captured something essential about the transformation happening across the galaxy. 5 years after Representative Thulnara had arrived on Earth with an apology, humanity stood at the center of a galactic community of 47 species. The coalition had grown into a true federation with joint military forces, shared research facilities, and open trade. The traditional council still existed, reduced to a mere 15 species clinging to their old hierarchies and classifications. They posed no threat, only a reminder of what had been. The change wasn't without problems. Cultural conflicts arose. Some species struggled to adapt to the coalition's egalitarian structure. Others resented humanity's prominent role, seeing them as upstarts who'd risen too quickly. But the problems were manageable because the system allowed for disagreement, debate, and resolution without forcing conformity. Captain Sarah Okonkwo, now an admiral herself and captain of the Endeavor II, stood on the bridge alongside her Venathi co-captain, Rael Mora. The new ship was a marvel, incorporating technologies from a dozen species. It had human railguns and Venathi energy weapons. It had shields and human armor plating. It had teleportation systems designed by Dr. Okafor and propulsion engines created through collaborative research. It was the physical embodiment of what the coalition represented: diversity creating strength. "We have our orders," Rael Mora said, their crystalline form shifting through colors that Sarah had learned to read almost as well as human expressions. "Exploration mission to the Andromeda frontier. 6 months, 20 systems, looking for new species to contact. Just like the original endeavor, Sarah said. Going out to meet the unknown, except this time we're not going alone. And this time, Rail Mora added, we know what to say when we meet them. Not join us or be classified. Not our way is the only way. Simply, we are explorers from the coalition. We come in peace, seeking friendship, knowledge, and cooperation. You're welcome to join us as equals or simply to know us as neighbors. The choice is yours. Sarah smiled. Think they'll accept. Some will, some won't. But we offer them something the council never did. Genuine choice without judgment. That alone will make a difference. The Endeavour 2 departed Earth orbit, accompanied by a small fleet of coalition vessels representing 8 different species. They jumped to wormhole transit, beginning a journey that would take them far beyond explored space. Behind them, Earth continued its transformation from an isolated world to a hub of galactic civilization. Human cities now hosted aliens from dozens of species. Human scientists worked alongside Velothi researchers, Sarani philosophers and Haltoran engineers. Human children grew up knowing that the galaxy was vast, diverse, and full of people who were different but not inferior. In a small apartment on Olympus Station, Amara Okafor worked on her latest project. She'd spent years refining teleportation technology, but now she was working on something more ambitious. A universal translator that could learn new languages in real time, making first contact with unknown species smoother and more successful. It was tedious work, requiring collaboration with linguists, xenologists, and AI specialists from multiple species, but it was satisfying in a way that weapons development had never been. Dr. Okafor, you have a visitor, her assistant said. The Lara entered, the Velothi's form displaying the warm amber of friendship. They'd become unlikely colleagues over the years, working together on various technical projects. The awkwardness of their first meeting had long since faded into mutual respect. I wanted to thank you, the Lara said. 5 years ago, I dismissed your species based on a superficial evaluation. Today you're one of the galaxy's leading voices for technological cooperation and innovation. You proved that my classification system wasn't just wrong but fundamentally flawed. You showed that diversity in methods and approaches creates strength rather than weakness. Amara set down her tools and looked at the alien who'd once called humanity primitive. You know what the funny part is? We never wanted to prove anyone wrong. We just wanted to be left alone to explore, to grow, to find our place among the stars. The council forced us to fight for that right. The Kresh attacked us. You all made us into warriors when we really just wanted to be explorers. And now you're both, the Lara observed. Warriors when necessary, explorers by choice. Perhaps that balance is what the galaxy needs. Species that can defend their principles without making warfare their purpose. Species that can adapt without losing their identity. The Council's glory lasted 12,000 years. Amaris, how long do you think ours will last? I don't know, the Lara admitted. But I believe we have a better chance because we built it on honesty rather than hubris. We acknowledged our mistakes, we learned from those we had dismissed. We created something based on cooperation rather than hierarchy. That may not guarantee success, but it gives us the best possible foundation. Later that day, a monument was unveiled on Luna's surface, visible from Earth. It was a simple structure, just a pillar of metal with inscriptions in 47 languages. The inscription read, "Here began the journey that changed the galaxy, not with conquest or force, but with the simple insistence on dignity, respect, and the right to exist on our own terms. We came to the stars with railguns because that was what we knew. We learned to build teleporters because adaptation is what we do. We changed the galaxy not by becoming what others wanted, but by showing what we truly were. May all who follow remember, civilized is not defined by the tools you use, but by the principles you uphold." At the base of the monument, smaller text added a note that made many smile. They said our weapons were primitive. They were right. They said primitive meant weak. They were wrong. They said we should abandon our ways and adopt theirs. We said we would do both, and that made all the difference. Admiral Kowalski stood at the monument's dedication, surrounded by human and alien dignitaries. He thought back to that first contact 5 years ago, when humanity had been dismissed and caged. He thought about the battles fought, the lives lost, and the hard-won respect that had followed. He thought about the galaxy they were building together, imperfect but honest, diverse but united, different but equal. "We did it," General Webb said, standing beside him. "We actually did it. We changed the galaxy. We survived." Kowalski corrected. "We adapted. We refused to give up. The galaxy changed itself. We just showed it that change was possible. Same thing, Webb said with a grin. Maybe, Kowalski admitted. But I prefer to think of it this way. They built teleporters first because that's what made sense to them. We built railguns first because that's what made sense to us. And then we built both because that's what humans do. We take what works from everywhere, combine it with what we already know, and create something new. That's not primitive or advanced. That's just human. And finally, that's enough. The ceremony ended. The dignitaries dispersed. Life in the coalition continued with all its complexities, conflicts and compromises. The traditional council faded into historical irrelevance. The Kresh Dominion reformed under new leadership that sought peace rather than conquest. And humanity, the species once classified as Category 7 pre-civilized, stood as one of the founding pillars of a galactic civilization built on respect, cooperation, and the understanding that there was no single path to the stars. The Council's glory had fallen, but from its ruins, something better had emerged, something that honored diversity, celebrated difference, and recognized that civilized didn't mean conforming to arbitrary standards. It meant treating all sentient beings with dignity, regardless of whether they fought with energy beams or kinetic weapons, whether they'd mastered teleportation millennia ago or learned it yesterday. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson, one that cost lives, pride, and the collapse of ancient institutions, but it was a lesson worth learning. Never mistake different for inferior. Never confuse advanced with superior, and never ever underestimate a species that has survived by adapting to every challenge their harsh universe could throw at them. Humanity had come to the stars with railguns. They'd learned to build teleporters, and in doing so, they'd torn down the walls of arrogance and supremacy that had divided the galaxy for 12,000 years. The shock that destroyed the Council's glory wasn't a weapon or a battle. It was a simple truth proven through blood and determination, that respect cannot be granted by committee or denied by classification. It must be earned, one action at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of standing firm in the face of overwhelming pressure at a time. Humanity had earned, and the galaxy would never be the same.